Hey, what's up guys? This video is for section 2.3, which is solving multi-step equations, and it is the second part of the lesson. So this is the second video. Let's go ahead and look at the steps that I show you guys to solve an equation. So step number one, you always want to simplify each side of the equation and get all the variables on the same side. So to do that, you are going to use the distributive property if you can, combine like terms if you have any. You can cancel fractions, and you must get all the variables on one side. Once you guys finish step number one, you guys can move on to step number two. And step number two is eliminate the constants on the same side of the variable. And to do that, you are going to use the inverse operations for adding and subtracting, which means the opposite. And step number three, you isolate the variable. That's the last step. So to isolate the variable, meaning that you want the x by itself or the y by itself or whatever variable you guys have, you are going to use the inverse operations for multiplying and dividing. So that's our goal. In order to solve an equation, you must get the variable by itself. We want to know what is the value of that letter, of that variable. So let's go ahead and solve some equations when we actually have fractions, and then we can solve for that specific variable. So the one on the left side, we have a 2m over 3 plus 1 equals 5. So one of the things that we have is a fraction. And step number one is you want to simplify the sides of the equation. So I like to draw a line under the equal sign. You guys don't have to do this on your paper, but it's a good way to see the left side and the right side of the equation. And when you look on the left side, that fraction, we can get rid of it by multiplying by the denominator of the fraction. On the right side, a 5 is just a number by itself, so you guys cannot do anything to that number. So I'm going to multiply this fraction by the denominator, but once I do that, I have to multiply the other side by the same denominator. But make sure that you guys always multiply everything on the left side and everything on the right side by that number. So I'm going to multiply the fraction by 3. So I'm going to put times 3 right here. And this number here, you also have to multiply by 3. So notice what I'm doing right now. I am multiplying everything by 3. And the 5, I'm also going to multiply by 3. And that's because whatever you do to one side, you have to do it to the other side. But make sure that you guys multiply everything by that denominator. So once you multiply this 3 by this fraction, well, remember that you can make this into a fraction, so you can put a 1 under the 3. But eventually, you can cross simplify those two 3's right here. There's 1, 2, number 3's. So you can simplify, cross simplify those numbers. And when you do that, you can cross them out. Okay? They will turn into 1, but we don't need that 1 because when you multiply 1, if you put a 1 here, 1 times 2, that's going to be 2. So you don't really need it. But make sure that you guys simplify the denominator with the number. So I'm going to bring down the 2m because that's what didn't cross out. So we cross out the 3 and the 3 here because you can cross simplify, but we didn't cross this one out, so you bring it down. The next one is 1 times 3. So I'm going to have plus, and I do multiply those two, and that's going to be plus 3. 1 times 3 is 3. And on the other side, you multiply 5 and 3, and that's going to be 15. So look at the equation right now. We don't have any fractions anymore, but you guys still need to solve for the variable. So I go to step number 2, and I do that because I don't have like terms. Notice these are not like terms. I don't have parentheses. I cannot distribute anything, and I already got rid of the fractions. So now let's go ahead and look at to cancel the constant that's on the same side of the variable. Now here's where you have to pay attention, because the constant on the same side of the variable, this is the variable, m is this one here. That's a constant because it doesn't have a letter, it doesn't have a variable. So I want to eliminate this number. So I'm going to do the opposite, the inverse operation of this plus 3. Opposite is minus. So I'm going to subtract 3. And 3 on the other side of that equation, which is the right side. You guys see the line. That's why I have the line, so you guys can see the two sides. And I'm going to simplify. I'm actually going to subtract or add those numbers. So let me bring down the line here. I know that these two numbers here will cancel. Positive 3 minus 3, that's 0, so they cancel. I bring down the 2m, and on the other side, I'm going to subtract 15 minus 3. That's going to be 12. Now I can move on to step number 3. Step 3, I'm going to isolate the variable. So it has a 2 next to it, so I need to get this by itself. And I need to understand what's happening. Here, I am multiplying 2 times m, so I have to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. So I divide by 2, and on the other side, you guys divide by 2. Here, the 2 over 2, that turns into 1. So I don't need to put a 1, but I'm going to show you guys that this would turn into 1 here. And you just bring down the variable 1m. You don't need that 1 in front of the m. So here's the m equals, and 12 divided by 2 is 6. So my answer is m equals 6. Now here you do the same thing. You want to get rid of the fractions, and then that way it's going to be a lot easier to solve for the variable. So I notice that I have a denominator with the negative 12. So my denominator is negative. Not very usual, it's not very common to have a negative under the fraction. Usually it's on the top or on the side, like on the left side, not on the bottom. It's not incorrect, it's just not common. So what it means is, since the denominator is negative, I need to multiply everything by a negative 12. So let's go ahead and multiply that. I put times negative 12 right here. Notice I'm using parentheses because that means multiplication. I'm going to multiply by negative 12 over here, and I'm going to multiply by negative 12 right here. So let me draw my line. I will multiply negative 12 times 1 on the left side, so that's negative 12. Over here, I do have a fraction with the negative 12 as the denominator, and I multiply by negative 12. Remember, that will simplify. You guys can cross those out because it turns into 1. Negative 12 divided by negative 12 is just 1. So I'm going to cross those out, and I keep what didn't cross out. So the 5 and the k didn't cross out. So 5 is here and the k. This one I will multiply. Careful with the signs. We do have a positive 6 times a negative 12. So that's going to be negative 72. So now I don't have fractions. I can move on to the next step, step number 2. Now, you have to understand though, the k, the variable, is on the right side of the equation. That's okay. You guys can have the variable on the right side. You guys can have the variable over here on the left side. Doesn't matter what side you guys have the variable. You just want to follow the steps to get that variable by itself. So step number 2, you isolate the variable. No, that's step number 3. I apologize. Let's go to step number 2. You eliminate the constants on the same side of the variable. So this is the variable. The constant is this one. So I will do the opposite of this constant, that number. So I am going to add, which is the opposite of minus, add 72 to both sides. So there's one, and then the other one over here. So when I add those two, I'm going to get positive 60 over here. Let me bring down the line right there. I'm going to bring down the 5k, and 72 and minus 72 cancels. They eliminate each other because they're opposites. Negative 72 plus 72 is 0. And the next step, you guys are going to divide. So this is step number 3. You want to isolate the variable. I am multiplying by 5, so I'm going to divide by 5. So here we go by 5. Over here, you divide by 5. 60 divided by 5 is 12. Bring down the equals. 5 divided by 5 is 1. We don't need that 1. It's just a variable k. And that is the answer. Now, once again, the k is on the right side, which is not very common. So one thing you can do is you can switch your answer. You can say, or k equals 12. So I'm okay with either answer, but this is more common in textbooks and actual tests and quizzes, worksheets. you guys will have the variable on the left side. All right, now these ones, we do have fractions, but it's a little bit different than the previous ones that I gave you in this video. So let's go ahead and understand the problem. You guys have a fraction x over 2, x plus 2 over 9. So x plus 2, everything is on top of the fraction, and you have a denominator of 9 equal to 5. And over here, you have a minus 10 over everything over negative 4 equals 2. So the idea to get rid of fractions, that's a fraction, is the same thing as before. You multiply by the denominator. But this is what's going to happen because this fraction is a little bit different, like I mentioned, than the previous ones that you guys saw on this video. So I know my denominator for this one is 9. So I'm going to multiply this side by 9 and this side by 9. And I'm doing this only one time. Let me just draw the line here so I can show you guys the left side. So there's the line. Only one time because this is on top of the fraction. So this is one term. It's only one fraction. It has x plus 2. So you just need to multiply by 9 one time. Do not multiply the 9 by 2 because it's not separate from the fraction. It's actually part of the fraction. So the idea, again, when you multiply by the denominator, this 9 and this 9 will cross simplify. It turns into 1. 9 divided by 9 is 1. So you can cross them out. And the only thing that we have left is the x plus 2. So I'm going to bring that down, x plus 2. And over here, 5 times 9, well, that's going to be 45. No more fractions. You multiply by the denominator, and whatever you do to one side, make sure you multiply the other side by the same thing. There's when we multiply by 9, you multiply by 9 the other side. Step number 2, you guys are going to eliminate the constant. So this number 2 is a constant on the same side of the variable, so you do the opposite, minus 2, minus 2. So this will cancel right here, and you bring down the x, you bring down the equals, and 45 minus 2, that's going to be 43. And that is the answer. So this one, just be careful with the signs. It's the same concept, but the denominator is a negative 4. So I'm going to multiply this side by negative 4, and I'm going to multiply this side by negative 4. So what happens with the 4s, remember, this negative 4 and this denominator negative 4, they simplify. They will cross out each other. It turns into 1. So I'm just going to cross those out. There we go. There we go. And I'm going to keep what's on the top of the fraction. So let me just draw the line here under the equal sign. Let me bring down the a, the minus 10, and I'm going to multiply the other side. 2 times negative 4, that's negative 8. And I go to step number 2. I don't have fractions anymore. So the next step, you eliminate the constant. So that's on the same side of the variable. So the a, that's the variable. This is the constant, so I'm going to do the opposite. So I'm going to add 10 to both sides. And when I do that, look, this cancels negative 10 plus 10. So you guys bring down the a, bring down the equal sign, and negative 8 plus 10, well, that's going to be positive 2. So that is the answer for this equation. Now this here is when the denominators are not the same. Notice that we do have different numbers under the fractions, and every number is a fraction, okay? So when that happens, when you guys have different fractions, that means you have to multiply by the lowest common denominator, and that's going to help you. So if you look at this one here, you have negative 5 over 2 equals 3 over 4 z plus 1/2. Well, the denominators, we have a 2 and we have a 4. So the lowest common denominator is going to be 4 because 2 goes into 4 and 4 goes into 4. So I need to multiply every fraction, everything on the left side and the right side by 4 because that is the lowest common denominator. And let me just write that down here so you guys can know LCD, the lowest common denominator is 4. So I'm going to multiply this one by 4, I'm going to multiply this one by 4, and I'm going to multiply this one by 4. Now look what happens here, okay? Since the denominator, we do have a negative 5, the negative goes with the top over 2, and the denominator is not the same as this one, you actually have to simplify. In other words, 2 goes into 4 2 times. So when you cross those out, this one turns into 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. But this one is going to turn into 2. 2 goes into 4 2 times. So what that means, you're going to multiply negative 5 times 2. So that's going to be negative 10. And let me just draw the line here. On the bottom, this turns into 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. I don't need that 1 on the bottom, so I just keep the negative 10. Over here, this fraction, 3 over 4 times 4, well, you guys are going to cross simplify the 4's here. And remember that that 4 turns into 1. So you just keep the 3. If you actually multiply 3 times the 1, it's just 3. Z plus, and over here, 2 is not 4, but 2 goes into 4 2 times. So I'm going to cross this one out, and this one is going to simplify to 2. 2 goes into 4 2 times. And then you guys multiply. And this is positive 1 times 2, which is positive 2. Now you guys don't have fractions. You can start solving for z. So the next step, you guys eliminate the constant. So we subtract 2 from both sides. So I'm going to have, let me just draw the line here, negative 12, 3c on this side, and these 2 cancels, positive 2 minus 2. Step number 3, you isolate the variable. So we divide by 3, and we get negative 4, bring down the equals, this turns into 1, we don't need it, and we have a z here. So negative 4 equals c, or z equals negative 4. So let's try another one here. The denominators are not the same. We have negative 1/3 minus 2 over 5a equals 2 over 15. So denominators are 3, 5, and 15. So the lowest common denominator for those 3 numbers, all the denominators, the lowest denominator is 15. So I need to multiply everything by 15. Lowest common denominator is 15, equals 15. So I will multiply this one by 15, this one by 15, and this by 15. Now, since the denominators are not 15, well, a couple of them are not 15, you're going to have to simplify, okay? Now, keep in mind, we do have a negative 1 here, okay? And we have a 3 on the bottom. So you cross simplify. The 3 goes into 15 5 times. So I'm going to cross this one out, and this one turns into 5. So when you multiply, let me bring down the line here. Negative 1 times 5, so that's going to be negative 5. The next one, okay? The next one, you guys have a minus 2 over 5. So the minus goes to the 2, the number on the top. But the 5, you can cross simplify with the 15. 5 goes into 15 3 times. So this one cross it out, and this turns into 3. So when you multiply negative 2 times 3, that's going to be negative 6. And you keep the a. Now let me do that again so you guys don't get confused. The 5 goes into 15 3 times, so you cross simplify. Then you have to multiply negative 2 times 3 is negative 6, and you guys keep the variable. On the other side, well, 15 goes into 15 1 time. So you guys can cross those out, and 1 times the top, 1 times 2 is just 2. So you just keep the 2 right there. No more fractions. So now it's time to move on to step number 2. You guys eliminate the constant on the same side of the variable. So I'm going to add 5. That's the number on the same side of the variable. You add 5. So you put the line here. This cancels. Negative 6a. And on the other side, you guys have 7. And now you guys, step number 3, eliminate, not eliminate, you isolate the variable. So we divide by negative 6, divide by negative 6. So this turns into 1. We don't need that 1, guys. Negative 6 divided by negative 6 is positive 1. We don't need it. So you bring down the a, equals, now this, guys, it's a fraction, 7 over negative 6. You guys cannot simplify. They don't have a common factor. So that's my answer. But I'm going to put the negative on the left side of the fraction because that's more common. It's not very common to have the negative on the bottom. Can you have it on the bottom? Yeah, you can, but it's not very common. So I just move the negative on the side of the fraction. And my answer is a equals negative 7 over 6. Now these two examples here is actually to put everything together so you understand how to write an equation and actually how to solve for that equation. So let's look at the first example, the first sentence here. It says, the instruction says you want to write an equation and solve. So that means that we need to make an equation and then we need to find the value of the variable. So we have find 3 consecutive integers with the sum of 96. So first of all, we're looking for 3 consecutive integers. Now let me explain what that is, okay? Consecutive integers are numbers that are next to each other. For example, 1, 2, and 3. Those numbers follow each other, so they are consecutive integers. You guys can say 11, 12, 13. Those are consecutive integers because they're following each other. They're next to each other, one by one. You guys can say 77, 78, 79. Those are consecutive integers because they follow each other. So we are looking for 3 consecutive integers, but the key is the sum of those 3 consecutive integers have to be 96. So how do you actually write an equation? Think about the variables. A variable is a number that we don't know what it is, but we know it has a value. So right now, I don't even have an idea what numbers add up to 96. So I'm going to say x is my first number. And when I do that, let's think about the next number. So if x equals, let's say, 8, the next number has to be 9. Now think about those two numbers, 8 and 9. Well, 9 is 1 more than 8. So my second number has to be x plus 1, 1 more. And that's going to be my second number. I don't know what it is, but I need to find my second number. And if my numbers, let's say the first number is 8, the second number is 9, the third number, well, that has to be 10. And 10 is 2 more than the first number, than 8. So my third number has to be x plus 2. And let's make sense of this problem, okay? The first number can be any number. It can be 8, 9, it can be 27, it can be 31. We don't know what it is, but it's just a random number. But let's say that the number here, let's pick a different example. Let's say that is 16. If the first number is 16, the second number has to be 17, which is 1 more than 16. But if this is 16 and this is 17, then the next consecutive integer has to be 18. And 18 is 2 more than 16. So the way we write down the equation, we need to use what we know about the numbers, and the sum has to be 96. So this is my equation. I'm going to have my first number plus my second number plus my third number equals 96. So I'm just going to label those terms so you know what we're talking about. So this one here is my first number. This one here is my second number. And this one here is my third number. Guess what, guys? Whatever the numbers are, they have to add up to 96. So let's go ahead and solve for x. Now here's what we do. We don't have parentheses, we don't have fractions, but we do have like terms. And you guys know what are like terms. Like terms are the variables that have the same letter, okay? So let me put the line right here. And on the left side, all of this right here, guys, well, we do have an x, an x, and an x. So I can, yes, I can combine 1x plus 1x plus 1x. 1x plus 1x plus 1x, 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. So we have 3x, and we can also combine the constants. 1 plus 2 is 3. On the other side, we just have a 96. Hey, that is my equation. I am ready to solve for x, for my variable. So I'm going to subtract the constant. So this cancels right here. And I will have 3x. And on the other side, we have 93. You guys will divide by 3. And I'm just going to put the answer on the side, guys. Let me just move this to the side. And x, this turns into 1 right here. So let's just follow the arrow. X equals 31. So we got the first number. 93 divided by 3 is 31. So let's use common sense, number sense. We know we're looking for 3 consecutive integers. If the first number is 31, then number sense, common sense, the next number has to be 32. And the next consecutive integer has to be 33. So my 3 numbers that I'm looking for are 32, 31, and 33. And if you guys add all those numbers, 31 plus 32 plus 33, that's going to give you guys 96. The sum of those 3 numbers is 96. Now this one is a little bit different because it says find 3 consecutive odd integers with a sum of negative 51. So this is the tricky part, guys. We want to find 3 consecutive numbers. They're going to be odd numbers, but they have to be consecutive. So let me explain what that means, okay? An odd number, let's start with something simple. Odd number 7, that's an odd number. The next consecutive integer is 9, not 8, because 8 is even number. So the next one is 9. But the next consecutive integer after 9 is 11. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for 3 consecutive odd numbers, odd integers, but the sum has to equal negative 51. So how do you guys write down the equation? Well, let's think about this. The first number can be any number. So that's going to be an x, okay? But the second odd consecutive integer, if you follow this example, is 2 more than the first one. So my second number has to be x plus 2. So this is my first number. This is going to be my second number. And if you guys look at the next number, so let's use this example here. 11 is actually 4 more than the first one. So the next one is, the third number should be x plus 4. So that's going to be my third number. So that's what consecutive odd integers mean. If you pick any other consecutive odd integers, let's say 13, well, the next one is 15. That's 2 more than 13. And the next one after 15 is 17. 17 is 4 more than 13. So that's the way you guys write the equation. Now the sum has to equal negative 51. So let's go ahead and write the equation. We have x, the first one, plus x plus 2 for the second number, plus x plus 4 for the third number equals negative 51. And just to help you guys out, this one is my first integer, this one is going to be my second, and this one is going to be my third. So I'm going to combine like terms. I have 1x plus 1x plus 1x. That's going to be 3x. So let me bring down the line here. 3x and positive 2 plus 4. That's positive 6. And then you bring down the negative 51. Let's go ahead and cancel the constant. You guys eliminate the constant, minus 6. So that's going to be, let me put the line here, 3x, and on the other side, negative 57. Then you guys divide by 3. And when you guys divide by 3, this turns into 1. So my next number is, or not the next number, my value of x equals negative 17. Now for this one here, you guys have to be careful because my answer is a negative 17. We're looking for odd numbers. It is a negative, but 17 is odd. So remember that we talked about the first number to be x, so that's my answer, negative 17. The second number is x plus 2, so you have to be careful on that. If x equals negative 17, so here's negative 17 plus 2, that's going to be negative 15. So that's the actual next odd consecutive number. And if x, once again, is negative 17, that's what we have. Negative 17 plus 4, that's actually negative 13. So the numbers that we're looking for are negative 17, negative 15, and negative 13. If you guys add all those numbers, negative 17 plus negative 15 plus negative 13, that's going to give you guys negative 51. But you have to be careful on this one because it is a tricky question. Since we have a negative 17 here, you're actually counting backwards. Negative 17, negative 15, negative 13. Not like this one where you guys go forward, 31, 32, 33. But you have to pay attention of what we have in the equation. I'll explain it again. If x equals negative 17, then x plus 2, negative 17 plus 2, that's negative 15 right here. And if x equals negative 17 plus 4, well, that's going to be negative 13. All right, guys, this concludes my video for the second part of this lesson. If you guys like my videos, you can click that like button. And if you guys like to subscribe, you can also subscribe to my channel. Make sure you guys practice your math, and I'll see you guys later.